Aloha! You are listening to Inside the Desert Oasis Room, episode number 239. This podcast is brought to you by Deadhead Rum, fine single blended rums made with sugarcane sourced from the jungles of Chiapas. Master blended by 43-year rum veteran Jorge Perez, the most decorated master blender in all of Mexico. For more information, check out their website at deadheadrum.com. This podcast is sponsored by Frogtown Brewery, an independent craft brewery and tap room located in Northeast Los Angeles along the LA River. Tell them the Desert Oasis Room sent you and get your first pint on us. Limitations apply. For more information, go to frogtownbrewery.com and follow them on social media at Frogtown Brewery. On this episode, we are joined by Francesca Po, PhD in Religious Studies, and Kristine apprentice at Spiritual Journey Tattoo. We chat about traditional Filipino tattooing methods, its history, practices, and more. As always, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did bringing it to you. If you'd like to follow our adventures, check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/PolynesianPop, where we chronicle events, bars, travel spots, cocktail tutorials, and more. And if you enjoy this podcast, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/PolynesianPop, where membership grants you early access to podcasts and videos, front-of-the-line privileges to new merch releases, as well as exclusive content, meetups, and screen credits. Alrighty, let's get into this. Pour yourself a cocktail and join us inside the Desert Oasis Room. Give it up for my friends, Francesca and Kristine.
Inside the Desert Oasis Room.
Alrighty, welcome back to another episode of Inside the Desert Oasis Room. And we are joined by two of my friends that are in the traditional Filipino tattoo community. So this one's a little bit different from the tiki stuff, but I think you guys are going to really enjoy this. Let's welcome Francesca and Kristine. Aloha.
Hello.
Mabuhay. Kumusta? For all of our listeners out there that don't know what kumusta is, it's a greeting of basically saying hello, but it is phonetically similar to como esta, which goes back to when the Spaniards had occupied the Philippines. And mabuhay is kind of our form of aloha. So mabuhay.
Mabuhay. Yeah, it's more like long live.
It's more like long live. Yeah, that's right. Long live. Thanks for driving out to the Desert Oasis Room.
So cool. Yeah. So cool to be here.
You know, I know that I don't exactly live around the corner, so it's always one of these things. It's why, when I reached out to you, Francesca, I was like, if you want me to come to you to make it easier, I'm happy to do that.
Like, I'm happy to drive to see this in real life.
That's right. That's great. That's great. That's awesome. And Kristine, I think you came also. You guys both live in Long Beach. Are you in Long Beach? Both of you?
Like a few blocks from each other.
Yeah, we were going to carpool, but I got to go to the shop after. So
okay. So the shop is Spiritual Journey.
Yes.
Yep.
And this is a shop that does traditional Filipino tattoos.
Yes.
Yeah, but also other indigenous tattoos.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. So Elle, who's the founder, also studied like different cultural tattoos, but specializing in Filipino. Probably like 90% is Filipino,
yeah.
right?
The full shop, we're all Filipino or like part Filipino. But Elle, has studied a lot of different cultures. So we have people who will come in and they're getting like Aztec tattoos, various like African tribal tattoos, but I'd say like 90% Filipino.
Yeah, and he also is like when the revival started, when he started the Filipino revival, he trained in so many different types of indigenous styles. You know, when you're kind of reviving something that has been erased by colonialism,
sure.
Like a lot of just indigenous people can come together and collaborate. So he's trained like most indigenous revivals around the country. So you'll see a lot of Native Americans that have been trained by him and like create the tools based on what he's done. Yeah.
And of course, the goal is to keep things as traditional properly I would assume, right?
Well, we do some machine. We do a lot of machine.
Yeah, it's
Well,
a mix.
I want to
mean,
talk about that too, but before we get into that,
Yeah.
let's give everybody your background so people know a little bit more about who you are. We'll start with Francesca.
Okay. Yeah. So I am Filipino American. I was born in San Francisco, but the first 7 years of my life, I grew up in the Philippines. Our family identifies as Filipino. My mom is Spanish Filipino. My dad's Chinese Filipino, but that's like the common culture that we all grew up with. I'm fluent in Tagalog, so I never lost the language even after, being back in the U.S. since I was 7. And yeah, I've just
That's
kind of
awesome.
been born and raised in Southern California, and then kind of traveled half my adult life just on my own,
Okay.
exploring.
Kristine.
Okay, so my name's Kristine. I would say I'm kind of the product of colonization. My dad was in the Navy, so I was actually born in Japan. Both my parents are Filipino, born in Japan, but always grew up around a strong Filipino community. So born in Japan, went to San Diego, went to Hawaii, came back to California, lived up in the Bay Area, always surrounded by a Filipino community of people, so I just never felt like out of place. Currently, I am an apprentice under the shop manager at Spiritual Journey Tattoo, and I'm being mentored by Elle Feston.
Okay. Very cool. So I'm going to give a little bit of my background just so you guys know.
Yes, please.
And I also don't know if my listeners know, but so Filipino American, Philam, but I was born in Manila. My family's from Quezon City and Marikina. And I don't speak fluent Tagalog, but I understand fluent Tagalog. And the reason being is when I was a young boy and I was in school here, I would speak Tagalog English, Taglish, to
Right.
my friends. And I didn't know that I was speaking part foreign language. I was just talking to my friends.
Yeah.
And they didn't understand a lot of what I was saying. And so my parents saw that and said, we're going to just speak English to him so that he can assimilate a little bit better. And I wish that it wasn't like that because, they spoke to themselves in Tagalog, but they didn't speak with me in Tagalog. It was always English. So I never really picked it up from speaking, but because they were always spoke to each other in Tagalog, I know, I understand the language. And I'm trying to learn it. The thing that I've learned about Tagalog is that the grammar and the sentence structure is completely different than any other language.
Yeah, you can't compare it.
Yeah. So you can't lay out a sentence the same way you would lay
Yeah.
out a sentence in English or Spanish or anything like
Yeah.
that. So it's completely different. But
Yeah. Well, you can't blame a lot of like immigrant cultures for losing language
Yeah.
because it is a survival mechanism. Like a lot of our generations, we might regret it now, but like at the time, it was really a survival mechanism. Yeah,
absolutely.
so-
But unlike Kristine, I always have found other Filipinos, but I've never actually felt like I fit in because I don't know what the right word is. Like homegrown Filipinos don't consider me fully Filipino, and Americans don't consider me American. So I'm kind of fall in the middle, right? And I think that a lot of immigrants feel that way,
Yeah.
And also mixed race people.
and
Yeah.
mixed race people
Yeah.
as well. Yeah. So my kids are from my first marriage, and my first wife was Latina. So my son just owned it. He calls himself the Latino Filipino. So.
Nice. I love that. Slides off the tongue
But
really
if
well.
you ask him what he mostly identifies with, he mostly identifies with Filipino. So
Oh, wow.
same with my daughter.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So, so having said all of that and knowing a little bit about your backgrounds, let's talk about what we're here for. So, traditional Filipino tattooing. So, let me start with a few questions for you, Francesca. I'm going to go off this list. How did you find out about Spiritual Journey? What brought you there?
So it was actually about 20 years ago when they first started. The Filipino Arts and Culture Festival in San Pedro, which is
Coming up soon.
again. Yeah, this is so, and we're gonna have a table, so
Yeah.
people should come out if this comes out
cool.
before that comes out.
September 14th.
Yeah, there's September 14th. So yeah, that used to be this huge festival. I think they're going to try to make it big again this year. And I remember going with my family and seeing a spiritual journey there with a table. And I just thought it was like the coolest thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, and they're my culture's tattoos. And that was like 20 years ago. So I remember kind of just keeping note of it and then telling myself, like, I want to earn that someday. And kind of, I had like this whole like life plan that I wanted to do. I wanted to do the Peace Corps and travel, get a PhD. So I was like, when I finish that list, then I will have earned the tattoos.
Okay.
And then that's kind of what happened. So it's like 20 years later, I came back, and I actually am living in Southern California again. And so I started that process to get the tattoos. Yeah.
Okay, so as someone who's not educated in traditional Filipino tattoos, and again, that's because I grew up here in Southern California.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to bear with me.
No, please.
I'm going to sound ignorant with a lot of the things that I'm going to ask you guys. But let me start off by saying, did you earn that? Was that really like a legitimate process you had to go through? Or was that something for yourself?
Well, when I say to earn it, so back in the day, you would it would be more officially earning it, right? So if you have gone through certain rites of passage in your community, then you would get certain patterns and certain tattoos. But for me, what I mean by earning it is like certain life accomplishments for myself.
Got it.
And then, so the patterns that are selected for me, and we could talk about how like the pattern selection happens, would be from those accomplishments that I have done.
Oh, gotcha.
So it's still kind of the same, but it's not like in the organic way where like when you're in the community, say you like get the title as chief, then you get the chief like tattoos, but for me it's like I just kind of finish all my things first, and then I got my patterns researched so that patterns I would get would still tell my life story.
Okay, so that was something that I wanted to talk about in this discussion with you guys, was the symbols, because I know that, like for example, Lane out in Vegas, I know that he selects symbols for people, and I thought that was kind of interesting because, again, being here from the States, right? Even though I was born in the Philippines, like I'm more familiar with American culture when it comes to tattooing, right? Where people go in and they look at a bunch of flash and they pick what they want, or they say like, "Can you make a drawing of my dog that passed away?" or something like that. But they're very strict sometimes with Filipino tattoos.
Well,
where they
Lane
say,
was actually trained by Elle.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's a similar method.
Yeah. So I mean, I feel like the thing with reviving something that has almost like disappeared is that there's going to be a lot of mess when trying to figure out how to navigate moving forward. So it's like the last 20 years, Elle has been researching different patterns, researching like the history of the Philippines, the different tribes, and figuring out different ways that different traditional methods of tattooing. And with that comes with a lot of mess and like just figuring it out, like what feels quote unquote right moving forward. And of course there'll be different schools of thought about like how we can transform what was and like how to move it forward. Because the thing is like also is like we don't want to just take from the tribes in the Philippines and take from the past because we don't live there anymore. Like we live here. Yeah, we live here. Our perspective and our lens is totally different. The times are different. We have different experiences. So when it comes to the patterns, like we had to, Elle and everyone who's been tattooing had to figure out how we're going to grapple with that and what we're doing to transform it moving forward, living here in the States.
So would you consider that, or would you call that a form of evolution? So from the tiki perspective, right? Because I'm a tiki guy. So, and I've been doing this tiki thing for like 30 years. So there's whole thing about cultural appropriation, evolution, devolution, and that kind of stuff, right? And there's people that argue like, tiki has to evolve. It can't stay exactly the same over the decades. I don't agree with that because here's why. Tiki is a fixed moment in time. When we celebrate mid-century celebration of Polynesian culture, we're celebrating something that happened in time. Like Civil War reenactments can't evolve. It's a fixed moment in time. So to me, like, you know, as I mentioned earlier, if we're trying to do what Don and Vic did, Don the Beachcomber and Trader Vic, the two guys who were really the forefathers. Don was really the one who started it all, and Vic became his biggest rival, frenemy, because they also were kind of professional rivals, right? They still leaned on each other, even though they were competitors. That's a fixed moment in time. So when anything changes, I argue that it's devolution. Because evolution doesn't exist for something that's fixed in history, right? Civil War, American history, Filipino history, you name it. Spanish-American War. I mean, we can go on and on and on. Like, that doesn't evolve. That happened in the past, and we're either celebrating that or we're not. And I know I'm going to get a lot of, if I'm going to get quote unquote hate, or people are going to, I mean, I don't even think that like I'm expressing an opinion. Maybe people will say that I'm expressing an opinion, but I'm just saying that like the facts are the facts. So would you say, going back to what we're talking about, would you call that evolution or devolution? Or do you think that the people that were practicing at that time maybe see it as devolution?
That's a big question. So
we're going to get deep today.
Yeah, no, it's good. We're here for it.
And I think that your definition of that is really interesting. I understand your perspective. And I think my answer would be different if I was still in the Philippines, like fully Filipino, practicing these practices. But because I'm in the States and I have a very different perspective, I feel, go ahead.
And for the record, I'm sorry to interrupt you. For the record, I agree with you because I also grew up in the States.
Yeah.
But then I want to have my tie back to my
Of
culture.
course, yeah. So that I mean, with at least specifically with the way we do motifs and patterns nowadays in our shop, and how I'm trained, is that we still are utilizing. The thing is, so I feel like it's hard because I feel like you need context. Everything needs context, and like you can't just do it in like a 5-minute conversation with someone. Like I'm literally studying as an apprentice, and I'm like steeped in this all the time. But but like generally, we still use like ancient patterns, but we stack our patterns. So like let's say like a zigzag means like a river, but with us, like we'll stack the river with like triangles, which are mountains. And then we'll stack it with like rain clouds, and then we'll stack it with like lightning, and like that will mean something else today. Like that could represent someone who works like as a pilot in airlines. Okay. Because in the past they didn't have pilots. There were no airplanes, but we're still using the ancient patterns and the meanings and stacking it. So we're like breaking it down, but then we're like transforming it into something that's relatable to people here in today's day and age. So it's kind of a mix. It's not black and white to me.
Right.
And it's really complicated, but like...
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a way to break it down.
So when you described all of those symbols, it's funny that you said pilot. That might describe a pilot. The way that I saw it was someone going on a journey with all of the turmoil or all the things you have to overcome, right?
For sure.
From the rivers to the mountains to the clouds and the weather, the storm.
Yeah.
And so that's how I interpreted that.
But that's the awesome thing I think about tribal tattoos, is that it will mean different things to different people.
Okay.
And the meaning can transform like as you go through your journey. So with us, like we have people fill out a questionnaire, and we do choose patterns for them based on like where their family's from, the way they answer the questionnaire, like what they answer. And the researcher is usually the one who has to explain why they chose certain patterns and the way it's stacked and how it's broken down, because it could be the same pattern, but it would mean different things to two different people. Like they'll have the same pattern, but to each of them, they'll know like the breakdown of it, but the translation, I guess, will be different depending on their story and their journey.
So how do you know which patterns are accurate and which ones are correct and their meanings? I mean, like today we can go on the internet, but before that, where was all of this documented?
What do you mean, like accurate? Like the basically the
like, for example, you said that maybe a zigzag could symbolize a river. Where does that come from?
oh gosh. Okay, so
Well, yeah, it's something that just kind of a little bookmark to add in. So Elle works with anthropologists as well, so people with PhDs in the Philippine anthropology, and he, people are constantly sending him new photographs and new artifacts. So the pool of patterns that Spiritual Journey works with are real patterns, like that tribes in the Philippines use, or indigenous tribes all over the world use, depending. And so he's got this like pool of patterns. And then again, I think what's important, like whether it's evolution or devolution, I think Kristine's description of it being messy, I think in any revival, it's always going to be messy because it was erased and you're bringing it back, So it will always have like a mess of it. And I think, there is just kind of like you kind of have to trust the intention. We're going to mess up some parts of it, and some parts of it, like it's great that we're reviving it. So there's like good and bad, and it is messy,
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, there is good intention in the sense of like, Elle's really working with anthropologists, and we have a connection with indigenous tribes in the Philippines. And what I think is really interesting, I don't know if Elle's probably told you this story, but like the evolution of tattoos of indigenous people in the Philippines is also evolving side by side with what we're doing at Spiritual Journey.
Oh, that's
because
interesting.
they don't have the resources that we have in terms of connecting with anthropologists and all these researchers getting all these patterns. They only have the patterns that they had, that they managed to keep, but it's not even all their patterns. They might not even have all their patterns anymore because it got erased, So if you look at like Wang Od and Grace's Wang Od's granddaughter, like some of the patterns and the methods they use, they got from Spiritual Journey and Elle, because like they lost it as well.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so with the research that Spiritual Journey's been doing with all the anthropologists that Elle works with, or that we work with, it kind of like gets brought back to the indigenous tribes in the Philippines as well, because they didn't have, because it was erased there too, And same thing with like the other tribes that Elle will work with here. It's like it's been a lost tradition, so some methods have been borrowed as well from all the research that's been happening at Spiritual Journey, because it's just, otherwise it just doesn't exist, So that's where the messiness comes from. It's like, it's hard to, there's no...
But that's a good answer though. I mean, you just you just have all these different sources, and you just kind of have to
like piecing it
together.
Yeah, and some of the like the big things, like, so I am currently Elle has helped like really pushing me to try and revive Mindanao tattoos, because a lot of the tattoos right now are from Luzon.
Right.
Thanks to like Wang Od and Grace. And, all of them. So, but the way that I kind of feel like I'm recognizing the way he's teaching me how he approached like reviving certain patterns, finding patterns, motifs, figuring out or like what they mean. And like what tribe they're from. So I'm always looking at, because he's working with anthropologists, we're looking at like their clothing, like the things they stitched in their clothing, their like pottery, what they were engraving in what, and like similarities in like tribes. And then we have to study like the animals that existed at that time that they might be referenced in that region, the plants, the bugs, and then looking at like mythology and folklore, the stories that they shared, and like why certain animals were significant to them and what it could mean, and like kind of finding like little bits and pieces and putting it together and being like, what can we draw from this?
What tells a story?
And sometimes we're just like, it's like a sticky note and being like, I think this is what it means, question mark. And then finding more resources, talking to more people, being like, what do you think that means? So it's really piecing it together. And like, I mean, even Al, like when I talk to him, he'll tell me like certain motifs. He'll be like, oh, I totally thought it was this one thing, but then I found all this other information. I'm like, and I think it's this other thing. And he'll be like, that's just what I currently think.
Right.
But kind of letting
research
letting there be space for it to change,
Right.
just depending on what resources come up, who he's talking to.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Like where the research itself evolves, also like evolves where the tattoos are going. So.
Yeah. God, it's such an interesting thought. So the more that you guys talk, the more questions pop up into my head.
Yeah. The more you know, the more you realize.
Right. The more you realize you don't.
The more you don't know.
But then it also exposes like certain things about the tattoo culture in general, or the practice of tattooing in general, because we live in a modern time. So it's 2024, and people, they just tattoo whatever they want, right? And for some Filipinos or Filams, they're tattooing like the sun from the flag or whatever. That's a completely different school of art than traditional Filipino tattooing. What are your thoughts about that?
I think it's just different.
Yeah,
right?
I feel like there's room for everything.
It's like new school.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So there's like contemporary tattoos. So they like at Spiritual Journey, we'll tattoo the sun, right? Like
they'll incorporate the sun.
Okay.
You can ask if you want like a traditional, or if you want a contemporary, if you want like a hybrid of the two. So
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's like people it's their body, so they
Right,
can kind of do what they want on it.
Yeah.
We're like, like if that's what you want to incorporate, that's what you want to incorporate.
Yeah.
So again, I'm coming from like, as a tiki guy, I'm a very traditional tiki guy. If I could remove this window, I'd remove this window, because the old rule of the tiki bars were no clocks, no TVs, no windows. Perpetually dusk, so you don't know what time of the day it is. And the casinos picked up on that, and in the 60s and 70s, no clocks, no TVs, no windows, because they didn't want you to know what time it was outside.
That makes sense.
It's just
cool.
same thing with the tiki bars, right? They just wanted you to be in their own world that they've curated, and they just wanted you to eat and drink all day and all night. And the casinos want you to gamble all day and all night, right? So that's a practice that. So I'm very, again, no LED bulbs in here. And all these different quote unquote rules, they're not really rules, it's just a commonality that a lot of these bars incorporated. And when I see people, mix and match with new school and old school, it really bugs me. It's kind of like the old hot rod with billet wheels, like it's, either go traditional or do new school. When you start mixing, it's just kind of weird to me. But maybe I'm just.
It might just be an aesthetic choice for some
too,
people.
Yeah, I think.
Maybe it's just me that's like that. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think it's. So I'm like thinking. So in my thinking is like we do. We kind of push for like get the traditional, traditional framework, like if you really want to
represent your culture,
we're reviving it, do traditional. But at the end of the day, we're gonna let them decide. Like we're not gonna like hold them to it, or I feel like we're not trying to gatekeep it either. Like it's gonna evolve the way it evolves, or maybe.
Well, we might be talking about apples and oranges.
Right, exactly.
In
tattoos and tiki, it might not work.
But tattoos, it's like because they're getting on their body, so that's kind of why we just let it go. But we also have our own.
And I understand
about
like the thought of tattoo culture evolving into modern times. It's different than what I'm talking about.
Right.
So,
but it's also so there's also like, say for me, I want traditional, right? But there's other parts of my body that I want tattoos in, but the traditional just doesn't have tattoos there. So I have incorporated some, or my tattoo artist Zell, so Elle's partner. So we've incorporated like a combination of the traditional patterns and framework, and also just kind of like a brand new style, because it just didn't really exist. So like in parts of my back, like I have Luzon tattoos, but like the bottom part of my back does not have tattoos in Luzon. So, but I wanted that part tattooed. So she created a design that had like Luzon patterns and had like a traditional look to it, but it just really just didn't exist in Luzon
at that time.
Yeah.
What's funny is this kind of all reminds me of this pirate festival I went to in Seal Beach. So every genre or subculture, whatever you want to call it, has their really like hardcore people, right? So like you guys are very much keeping this tradition as authentic as possible. I'm the same way with this tiki subculture. And I went to this pirate festival and I overheard these two guys like just talking shit about this other guy, going like, look at that guy. He's wearing a Spanish top, like Spanish pirate, but then he's wearing Caribbean pants, like a Caribbean pirate from the Caribbean. He's like, it looks so stupid. It doesn't look right, and I can't tell the difference.
Right.
Dude looks like a pirate.
Like a pirate. Either way.
He's like cosplaying a pirate, right? And I thought it sounded ridiculous, but then I thought, yeah, that's probably how I sound with my friends.
No, totally. Yeah. I'm
sure.
like totally in the historical costuming world, and so it has to be like 18th century pirate culture. But they're like, "Why are you doing like 19th century Spain and then 18th century Europe?" Like,
yeah.
It's hilarious.
Sure. Sometimes it's just like, can I just live though?
I know. Can I
have
fun? Exactly. Yeah.
So let's switch gears for a little bit because I want to talk about the methods that you guys are doing at Spiritual Journey. Talk me through what that process is like. How long does it take? How painful is it versus like say a gun? And all of that. And how many people are involved? Like are there people that stretch? Are there stretchers and all that?
Yeah. So honestly, let's see. So Elle started tattooing. He was just tapping, and everyone at the shop learns hand poke first, and then we do tapping.
And describe that to us. What does that mean?
Hand poke is like just like one needle, and like it's like a flicking.
Yeah, you kind of
It's
like
just one
scoop
hand.
the skin and put the ink under.
Yeah.
It's
it.
essentially
You kind
like
of-
dot by dot.
Yeah.
So like if you
Ooh.
think of a line and then think of it like as just dots overlapping each other and you just have like one needle. So it's the slowest process.
Right.
But it doesn't hurt as much.
I don't think it hurts as much. People
Yeah.
think it's going to hurt more than
It
machine.
And it
Sounds like
heals
it.
so much better too. You don't even need to do the aftercare.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
it
not
heals so well.
Yeah, everyone thinks it's going to be worse, but it's less traumatizing to the skin. If you think about it, machine drags across your skin at like a million miles per hour. I don't know. And then hand poke is like slow. You're just doing dot, dot, dot,
Right.
dot.
And it's like because it is just like inserting the ink under your skin, right? Like it's like not abrasive. So
inserting the ink is a very good description, I think.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
Does it
As
draw-
opposed
does
to
it
like
draw
the gun
blood?
where it just really like
just
literally
rips
rips
your
your
skin.
skin
Yeah.
and then puts
That's
the
a good
puts
description.
So
the ink on
does
top
it
of
draw blood when you do the poking?
Yeah, it still draws blood,
Still
but
draws
not as
blood.
much.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. The first time I did a hand poke, I was like, "Oh my god, why is she bleeding so much?" And they're like, "You forgot to put the ink in the needle."
Oh my god.
And I was like, "Oh, okay."
just straight poking.
It's just straight up poking. I was just making her bleed. I was like, "I'm sorry."
You forgot. Kind of important.
Yeah,
step.
really important. So hand poke, tapping, which a lot of more people are familiar with on
Right.
social media, I think too, is literally like you hear the tapping. So you have like a stick of some point in one hand, and then the other one's like a needle
with a
attached
needle,
to
yeah.
another stick.
So it is a needle, but didn't they used to use like bone?
It's a guava thorn.
Oh, it's a
Yeah.
thorn. Okay.
Yeah, well, at least that's one odd uses.
yeah,
guava
but I
thorn.
think different
Yeah,
tribes use different
tribes, yeah.
things.
Got it.
According to what resources they had. But in our shop, yeah, we just use needles, sterile needles.
Okay.
It still has to follow like the
Absolutely.
the rules, the laws in the
First,
United
yeah.
States.
Cleanliness, like we don't
Yeah,
we don't
yeah.
know all these people.
Yeah,
Right.
And we don't have access to these trees.
yeah. There's not a guava tree growing in the
No,
backyard.
yeah. So we have had some people ask us like, "How traditional is it? Are you using like a thorn?" We're like, "No, just needles."
Yeah.
The health department wants us to use.
yeah. And then we do machine. We actually do a lot of machine, contrary to what a lot of people think.
See, I didn't
believe.
think you guys use machine at all.
We use machine a lot
Okay.
because the
You
thing
pay per hour, and it's faster.
pay per hour. It's a lot faster. People who come in want like big pieces, like chest pieces. Like usually, a lot of people will come in for their first tattoo and they're getting a half sleeve, which is a big piece for your first tattoo.
Yeah.
And even a half sleeve will take like anywhere between like 8 to 12 hours. So imagine that with versus like tapping and hand
It'd be
poke will
double
take
the amount.
2 to 3 times longer than machine. And machine, because of like this day and age, machine can do a lot more detailed, cleaner lines that just look better aesthetically too. Because at the end of the day, we still want it to look really beautiful.
Right. It still has to, it has to look really nice because it
Yeah.
represents the shop and it represents you as an artist.
Yeah,
and stand the test of time. Like, you know, people are living longer now too.
Yeah. So, yeah, honestly, we usually use machine, but as an apprentice and the other apprentices there at the shop, there's 3 of us right now. We're all
Everyone
doing
learns
hand
the
poke.
traditional way,
Yeah,
yeah.
we'll learn the traditional way first before ever touching machine. So,
Which way do you like applying tattoos better for yourself? Which way do you enjoy
like
more?
receiving it or like
Applying
doing
them, applying them. And then receiving them, you could tell that as well.
I'm still mostly just doing hand poke. I've practiced tapping a little bit. Tapping's way more fun than hand poke, but it's way harder.
Okay.
But it's really fun when you get into the rhythm of it. And then machine just intimidates me. I could just be in my journey right now. Everyone at the shop is like would just prefer just to do machine now because they're doing bigger pieces. They don't have
Right.
like the patience for hand poke and tapping now. Hand poke I feel like is very like I get into like a meditative state, which is really nice.
Okay.
But yeah, machine is so intimidating to me. Just the tearing of the skin really gets me. But
Yeah.
we've actually done other methods at the shop, and like Elle has tried other methods. So in Mindanao, one of the tribes will actually do the cutting method, which we
Cutting.
I mean,
And he
with
does
body
scarring,
modification,
too. He
he's done
does
scarring,
scars,
he's done
yeah.
like branding.
Yeah.
Okay.
Scarring and branding. He's trained in all of that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
so
Like
there's
Joseph
so
has
many methods.
has a scar tattoo that Elle did.
Yeah, Joseph's one of the artists at the shop. I love his legs are like the sketchbook, and it's just like everyone will practice different like types of traditional methods. Like I think the most painful one he's told me was it was with like it's like a sewing needle. Have you heard about that one? Gosh, I
They
wish
practice on him?
Yeah, I mean he's like down though.
He's down for the practice. Yeah, like Rona's partner, his leg is all like when Rona's practicing on him. So
Yeah.
you'll see how she evolved in her
willing
with his leg.
participants.
Yeah. And they're free when you get
it's
practice
kind of
done.
cool.
It's free when you
yeah.
get
Kinda
practice
cool,
done.
right?
Yeah. So like
It looks good. It looks cool.
yeah, and it's just he knows how they all feel. Like I was trying the cutting method. Basically, again, because things are different here in the States
Yeah.
in this current day and age. We used like, you know, the microblades that people use for their eyebrows.
Yeah.
We actually just had that because Zell used to do eyebrows. So we had a bunch of that in the shop. So he was like, this is sterile. We'll just grab this. It's not, you can't cut that deep with it because it's a tiny blade. So like, there's not a lot of room for error. Just dip it in. We dipped it in ink, and then I just like cut my knee. It was so scary. But in the traditional ways that they have a blade, like a full blade, and
Yeah.
they would just cut.
Wow.
And then put the ink on top.
Yeah, rub the soot on top.
Yeah. It's like the ash. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is a little intense for
Wait, but
me.
you said Joseph said like the sewing was the most painful.
Yeah, that one, I think you take a needle and it's like you dip the string in ink, and then literally your skin is like as if you're like putting it through like a cloth, and you pull it.
Wow.
You pull it,
the
but
ink
it's
comes
supposed to
through the thread.
Yeah, the pink, and then it creates a straight line. Well, if you put it in straight,
Yeah.
but
Oh, that
one
These all sound like so painful.
that one I haven't tried. I've
tapping
heard,
again. Okay,
Yes.
so the receiving, if I weren't paying per hour, I would just get it all tapped and like take a nap.
Or
You know what I
hands
mean?
off, yeah.
Like I would just nap while they
I've
do
heard
it.
stories of people falling
Yeah.
asleep when they're getting
Yeah.
tattoos.
Yeah, well, parts of my arm I would like kind of fall asleep because it doesn't hurt.
I
a lot.
mean,
Yeah.
I don't know how they're able to do that because it just sounds so painful. But for some people, I guess it's relaxing.
yeah.
I think if you're there for hours, like you start to get used to it a little bit.
Your body
and
adjusts to it.
Yeah, your body
What's-
adjusts, recalibrates. You just kind of sit there.
What's the longest that the average person could sit?
Well, sessions usually run between 4 to 6 hours.
Okay.
So I will say that. But the last couple of days, there was one of our clients came out of town. I think he was from Virginia. He was being tattooed by Zell. I could not believe how long her sessions were. He did 2 back-to-back 8-hour days. And he has a third one today. I don't know if he's coming back.
Yeah, some people who are coming from out of town, they will come for like 3 days in a row and do full 8-hour days for them. You know? And that's so intense. But they're already flying out here to get it done, so they just power through it.
Shouldn't there be like a healing time though between that?
Not if you do it that close together.
Yeah, no. If you do it back-to-back, it's
It's like
still
one long session.
Yeah, your wounds, it's still open. It's
Yeah, they're all
fine.
still
But once you if you get tattooed and then you wait a couple days, then we just tell you, let's just wait 2 weeks before we go back.
Okay. So should we get into appropriation?
I don't know. We're kind of like talking a little bit
I
about
feel like
it
we
too.
kind of in and out talking about it.
Yeah, I mean,
Inevitably.
Yeah, I think it's kind
Because
of
we have
organically
that-
in the conversation.
yeah, we have the same thing happening in the tiki world right now.
Yeah.
There have been calls for that there's appropriation happening. I don't disagree with it because some of it is blatantly cultural appropriation.
Yeah.
But there is a fine line between appropriation and appreciation.
Yep.
And where that line is. I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are on that with tattoos, because there are people that maybe, right, the kanji, people get that tattooed all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. There was, that is a line that I am always thinking about, that I feel like I'm always sitting on, especially when I started. I mean, I've only been at the shop for a little over a year now. And something earlier you said during your intro about feeling like if you were Filipino enough, or,
Right.
around the people you were. And I always said, I always felt comfortable in my
Right.
skin. The weird thing is that when I got these tattoos, I suddenly felt like I didn't know. I was like, did I cross
Am
the line?
I really Filipino?
Was that okay? Was that not
That's
okay?
not what I expected you to say. I thought you were going to say it validated your...
No, I think for a
Okay.
lot of people it does validate that they do feel more comfortable in their skin. They're like, yeah, this is who I am. For me, I felt like suddenly I felt very visible to people. It felt very loud, and
Okay.
that it was going to demand answers to certain questions that
But
I
do you
didn't
think
have
it
the
felt like
answers
that
for.
But your
because-
process happened so quickly
Yeah,
too.
that's
Okay.
true.
Like it wasn't gradual. Like
No, yours was 20 years ago. You
Yeah.
were thinking about it.
Yeah,
You're like,
20 years
"It's
ago for
time."
me, and then I get 3 hours a month. Some months I skip because I want to save money,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
And then so for me, it's little by little, it's been coming out, and so the my identity kind of evolves to that. But yours happened within a matter of 3 months.
Yeah,
right?
I was and even then, coming to the shop, everything I was kind of dropped in, and part of me feels like I was always thinking about these things, but it wasn't something like, ooh, traditional tattoos. That's where I'm going to. That's where I want to arrive at. It was just traditional tattoos, interesting. And I walked into the shop. I started the next day.
Yeah.
That was my thing.
And then Elle was like, "You should revive this."
Yeah, you should revive this tribe. And I was like, okay, I'll start with I had a little piece on my hand that Rona, the other apprentice, tattooed on me. Then after that, it was my forearms. And then 2 weeks later, it was my upper arms. And then it was my chest and then my back. It was all done in 2 months.
Yeah. There.
And so suddenly I just felt all of a sudden,
you're
suddenly I'm supposed to be,
representation too.
representation of
Yeah.
people that I'm still learning. I'm learning about the culture. You know what I mean?
That's fair. That's a fair, yeah.
Yeah.
For the record, I really like your tattoos.
Oh,
I
thank
think
you.
they look really great.
They look
Thank
so
you.
cool.
Yeah, they look super cool, and
Yeah.
they look like they belong on you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Would you say that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe that.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I'll see stuff when we talk about that. That's what I mean about appropriation, right?
Yeah.
You might have a guy who is obviously not of that culture, but he's got symbols from another culture,
right.
and it doesn't look proper
Yeah.
on them.
Yeah.
So
Well, I mean, I think so. So much of appropriation is actually asking first the question of who owns them, right? Who gets to decide, like who owns these patterns and everything. So I think that because spiritual journey has a connection with like Wang Ud and the spirit, like Elle actually tattooed Wang Ud, so she asked him to tattoo
Oh,
her.
really?
Yeah,
They've
like
exchanged tattoos.
yeah, they've exchanged. So like we have spiritual journey has a connection with people who have had like an unbroken tradition with this, you know, and we are Filipino, and we get our patterns research based on like our own life stories and our ancestry. So in that way, I feel like in the spectrum of appropriation, we're probably on the low side, even if no matter what, it is going to be messy and there's going to be some room for appropriation and getting things wrong. But then the other side of it, right? Because it's always a spectrum. So the other side would be like, you know, there's constantly Elle will be finding people on social media that like they copied somebody's exact tattoos, or copied like
That's always a
things
weird one
from
to
the
me.
internet. Yeah, they're like, we have this photo on the internet, somebody copied it exactly, and we're like, so that's straight up appropriation.
That's like, why do you want someone else's tattoo? That
I know.
doesn't make sense to
Yeah,
me.
don't you
It's
want
like-
it to be about you?
Yeah,
like
it should be-
specifically
But the thing is, they
yours,
think
like-
it's just a flash, right? They don't know that like certain patterns mean something to the person that has them. So it's funny because it'd be like say like The Rock's like has this tattoo and everybody copies his like chest and his arm, his sleeve.
Yeah.
But that tells his family story. So you're getting
exactly.
his family story on your...
And we get people who email us like just pictures that they found on Pinterest. They're like, I want this. But we really try to guide them and educate them on like, okay, well, what is it that you like about that piece? Like, is it the framing of it? Is it on your body? And then we share with them like we can create pattern or like research patterns that are very specific to you and your story. And we'll have non-Filipinos come in trying to get Filipino patterns. And I think the cautionary tale with like Polynesian tattoos, because a lot of non-Polynesian people get Polynesian tattoos, is like we are really trying. It's like we don't want to gatekeep, but we're also like, if someone's non-Filipino comes in like, I want that like a half sleeve of Filipino patterns.
One jeepney, please.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't know. No. We really ask them like, oh, what's your ancestry?
Yeah,
What's your story?
right.
Where is your family from?
Yeah,
Like,
right.
have you ever looked? Like, there's always patterns and motifs from
Yeah.
different regions of the world. Like, have you ever looked into it? And so it's kind of the beginning of their own journey.
And most of the time they
you know
do.
what?
They change their mind. They're like, actually, no, I want those
Yeah,
patterns.
now
'cause
it's
it tells you about
and,
him.
Yeah, and they're happy with it at
Yeah.
the end because they're like, oh, like I
That's
actually
awesome.
did
Right.
the research.
awesome.
And they
So you
learn
guys
that
are
that's
like-
actually, it's not flashy.
Yeah.
There's an education
Yeah.
process in it.
Yeah, like this is how we found these patterns and motifs. This is how you can do it too, if that is something you are wanting to seek.
Oh yeah, and then but we also, you guys like will outsource the Polynesians too. So there's like
Oh,
the
yeah.
Polynesian revival is like has its own history, you know,
Sure.
and it came before the Filipino, and then so Polynesians were first in all indigenous revivals, right?
Sure.
So if there's anybody from like a Polynesian background, like spiritual journey will outsource
We recommend them
Yeah,
to,
recommend to
like A-Town and Gartown.
A-Town,
Yeah,
yeah.
because we're like, oh, you want a Polynesian piece? Like, we don't specialize in Polynesian.
Yeah,
we
yeah. So
specialize
that's
in
the one thing that
Filipino,
outlives spiritual-
and we really try
Yeah.
to like, we're differentiate. We're like, while there is overlap, it's different,
It is. Well,
and we don't want to touch that. Like,
I can understand the mashup, for lack of a better term, when I see the Filipino sun and then interspersed with Polynesian tattoos. Maybe that's somebody that grew up in Hawaii, you know, and so they connect to both cultures because they're Filipino born, but they were raised on the islands. Hawaiian
Yeah, and then
islands.
that
Yeah.
kind of hybrid is something that only exists now, right? So it's okay to mix those now, having the traditional methods, having the traditional patterns, but like you're a mixed person, like that's
because I
how we
see
are
that,
now.
but then like because I
Yeah.
struggle with, I've been wanting to have some work done, but I haven't had work done because I'm so scared about it not being proper or correct. So as a tiki guy, I've been a tiki guy for 3 decades, but I'm not Polynesian, but I use the name Polynesian pop. There's a story behind why I use Polynesian pop. So the tiki subculture was largely started by Filipino immigrants.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people don't know. So Don the Beachcomber, who's credited with opening the very first Polynesian or tropical style bar, his whole staff was Filipino. All his bartenders were Filipino. They called them the Four Filipinos or the Four Boys. And the carvers were Filipino, from Mylan Guanco to Andre Bumatay. All the servers were Filipino because there was a lot of Filipinos were hiring Filipinos, right? And if you look at, I have photos because I do lectures on this. I have photos from the Tahitian family picnic, and it's the restaurant crew and their families, and like 90% of the people in the photo are Filipino. So this whole genre that we all enjoy, you know, the Filipino was not credited because it was the 1930s. It was
all the same for them at that point.
Yeah.
In the 1930s, racism and segregation was very much a part of American life, and a white business owner was not going to give his brown employee the credit they probably deserved. When you have cocktails like the Chief Lapu Lapu, nobody knows who made it. I can tell you it's not the business owner. Number one, because the business owner is running the business. The bartenders are the ones who make the cocktails.
And they're Filipino.
And when they made this drink, they named it after Chief Lapu Lapu, like one of our heroes, right?
Yeah.
So that had to be a Filipino
Yeah.
bartender, right? So all of this, like this term Polynesian pop was coined by Sven Kirsten, who wrote the Book of Tiki, which is right there, and it's named after the pop movement of, like, back then there was the pop art movement. This
Right.
was the Polynesian pop art movement, so he calls it Polynesian pop. So I use that name.
It's pop art as opposed
Right.
to like really just
because
trying to
the
appropriate,
the tiki movement was really more of an art movement
Right.
than anything
That
else.
makes
Only
sense.
recently
Yeah.
has it been focused on cocktails. But I used the term Polynesian pop to kind of represent the people that
That's the
weren't
art
represented.
movement,
You know,
Yeah.
so when they see Polynesian pop and they see me, a Filipino guy, I'm kind of representing for them.
Yeah, it's part of it. It's part of it
You know,
that it
that's
was
kind of
like
that's
Filipinos.
yeah. So where was I going with this? Because I identify as a tiki guy, but I also identify as a Filipino immigrant, I thought, is it okay for me to do that?
I think
I don't know. But
Yeah.
do you know who Trisha Allen is? Trisha Allen does Polynesian tattoos. She's lived all over the South Pacific, Hawaii, Marquesas, Tahiti, and she's been doing tattoos for 30 or 40 years. She's got a couple books out called The Polynesian Tattoo. And I asked her about it, and she said no. She's like, no, that I wouldn't consider that appropriation. But people ask her all the time, and when she approaches a tattoo, just like you guys, sometimes she'll say, that's not appropriate for you. I should make you something that's more appropriate for you. And she'll refuse to tattoo somebody.
Well, that's
Yeah.
the same thing. Like,
Same.
like actually, like tell us your life story, where you come from. It's kind of the same process, right? Like, there's an education process,
Or,
to make it
a
more
discussion.
yours. And a discussion.
Yeah. I feel like with appropriation and appreciation, it's context,
Yeah.
perspective, and lens has to be accounted for, and like it gets again messy. So and then also at the end of the day, when you're thinking about like what's okay for me to get, like I've been thinking about what's okay. I think that at the end of the day, with at least with tattoos, that's going to be your you can discern it and kind of come to a conclusion on your own at the end of the day. But that's after discussing with all of these people and really
Trying to get
thinking
as much
about it.
information.
Yeah, you're not just like, oh, I want this like tattoo
Gotcha,
this time.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
informed.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
informed. You've discerned about it.
informed, yeah,
You
yeah.
obviously, Elle always says like, if you want to get tattooed, that like that's your ancestor like tapping you on the shoulder, like inviting you back to your roots. So whatever that might look like for you will be different from what it looks like for me, what it looked like for Francesca, what it looks like for everyone. And
This is all great because then someone who's listening to this might hear that and say, yeah, you know what? That thing that I wanted to get, maybe I should think a little bit deeper about that.
yeah, or have more discussions
Or have
about
more discussion
it.
about
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
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 It's not a bad thing to be like, oh no, is that okay? I'm like, I think it's good that those questions are coming up. Like,
Yeah, I've been wanting to do that for 20 years.
You know
I
what's
mean, I'm
also-
that.
oh, yeah.
I've been thinking about it that long. Like, am I
See, it took me 20 years
right
too.
thing?
Yeah.
Am I doing the
Yeah.
right thing? Because
Yeah.
I don't want to do the wrong thing. And there have been a couple of times where I just almost just said, fuck it, I'm just going to go do it, because that's how I identify.
One time. Yeah, you got to take the leap of faith at one point.
Yeah, but I also is it offensive? Because I'm not Polynesian, right? But then, when I'm on the islands, whether it's Hawaii or the Cook Islands or anywhere else in the South Pacific, everyone thinks I'm local. So is it offensive if, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm just being maybe really cautious that I'm not doing something
Which
that's
is good.
offensive.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
So-
yeah.
I was gonna say, fun fact. So once you have an eye for the patterns, this is another just for the tiki thing, right? You'll see mugs and things like that with Filipino patterns on
Yeah.
it, which is really cool to spot every once in a while. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm looking around here if I recognize any of our patterns.
Yeah, I don't think that there will be in here because
I've
all of
seen
this-
some with
Oh, did you?
the rice patterns. I see the rice patties a lot.
Yeah. I mean, even
And
just the
zigzag.
weaving. We
Yeah,
use a lot
yeah.
of weaving
The weaving.
patterns.
Oh,
So
yeah,
any
that's ours.
weaving.
Yeah. the weaving is-
yeah, that's
yeah.
true. I
Yeah.
do have some carvings in here from the Philippines, but they're from all over. They're from whenever I go to one of the islands. There's some Cook Island stuff here, Tahitian stuff, and again, the idea is that it's representing what our forefather immigrants created. So someone asked me one time, how do you feel about cultural appropriation? And I said, well, it depends. So
Yeah.
what are you asking me?
Yeah, what's
I'm like, that's such a broad question.
That
I
is
know,
such a broad
I know. Ask
question.
me some, specifically what?
And I'll
what-
say okay, well, the white guy over there that's on one foot with a bone in his nose holding up a spear, for a photo,
Yeah.
that's offensive. But if you're going to ask me, am I offended by this whole tiki thing, I'll tell them, educate yourself and learn that, this was all started by Filipino immigrants. So I'm not going to be offended by the immigrants that came here before me and created this. I'm actually quite the opposite. I'm proud
And it's
that they made
yeah.
such an impact.
Yeah.
You know?
And we were saying too, parts of it, when we were talking about language, parts of it is just surviving in that context of time. You know what I mean? So a lot of times, so you have Native Americans in the U.S. when they realize that they can make money wearing their ritual wear.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So because they're it's a way that they can make some business. So obviously it's a wrong context to wear your ritual, but then you in your own tribal costume is gonna make a buck here. You know what I mean? It's a survival mechanism. So I think that's where it gets messy, but still it's your own choice with your own culture and trying to survive. And I talk about kamayan a lot, right?
Yeah.
So that's something that Filipinos made for tourists. Not all Filipinos ate with their hands in the way with the banana leaves. It's something that we did for tourists in the same way that Native Americans wore their ritual wear
Yeah.
for tourists.
Yeah.
But again, it's a survival thing when we're living in a post-colonial world. It might be messy, it might be appropriation, might be appropriating your own culture. But you kind of make those choices as informed as you can, and also recognize that it's also part of survival,
Yeah,
at certain
yeah.
points in history. Yeah.
Wow. This was a great chat.
Yeah.
We got
Yeah.
pretty deep, so...
Yeah, I know.
Jump right in.
But you know what I love about this chat is that we covered a lot of those kind of sensitive topics, but we did it with the intention of educating and the intention of understanding, right? So
Yeah.
for our listeners that are hearing all of this and are maybe thinking twice about something, whether it's a piece of art or a tattoo or anything else, just give it a little bit more thought and
Yeah, asking questions is really
ask the
important.
questions.
Yeah.
Ask questions and think about intent and all of that stuff. But we've reached our hour mark, so I hate to wrap it up already, but we're not done yet. We're going to have a video portion that's going to be coming up because Francesca is going to get some work done.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So-
So my next appointment
So
see the other
Oh,
one.
yeah.
you're okay with me capturing some of that?
Yeah, 100%. And right now, like, you can't see many of my tattoos.
At first, I was
Okay.
like, "Am I tattooing you today?" I was so confused.
Surprise!
I was like, "Oh."
So yeah, the
funny.
next month, in about a month, you'll see Zell is my artist. So she started Spiritual Journey with Elle, and they're partners. And then you can ask your questions about the history of the actual tribe. Like, we didn't talk about the tribe at all. So
Yeah.
Elle might be the best person to talk to about that. So it goes hand in hand with a tattoo shop and the revival.
If they're open to it, I'm happy to sit down, bring the microphones, and do like a sequel to this episode. We could do a
Yeah.
part
Yeah,
two.
for sure.
Yeah, I'm
And
sure
then-
he'll be. If you just go to
Yeah, we shout
go
out
to
the
shop-
tribe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then I'd like to obviously put this on video, this process on video, and maybe put it up on the YouTube so people can see like exactly what this process involves.
Yeah.
And see some of the symbols and how they differ from that Polynesian style that we're so accustomed to seeing.
Yeah. 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 Thanks for showing interest in our.
Absolutely. And
tattoos, too.
again,
Yeah.
thanks for your patience because I'm coming from a very uneducated perspective as someone who grew up here in Southern California.
Thank you for it. Like, we're learning a lot about
Yeah.
tiki culture and history too from you.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't even go much into that.
Yeah.
There's I just scratched the surface there. But just like the Filipino tattoo subculture, there's probably loads and loads and loads of information that just won't happen in one episode.
Yeah.
So, and I think Milo likes you.
I know.
I was like rubbing it on your
Milo's
back.
gotten comfortable over
cute.
there. I know.
Before we wrap, do we want to throw out any social media or any websites, or what can we promote for you?
Well, Spiritual Journey Tattoo on Instagram. Just contact us there. If you have any questions, if you're kind of contemplating on like if this is right for you, if you just want to chat, have questions, don't be afraid to ask questions. Yeah, Spiritual Journey Tattoo on Instagram.
And then my spiritual journey, my Instagram, my Instagram is fancy_po. So I have more of like that mid-century or just kind of historical fashion kind of take on my content. You want to look at that?
I love it. I love it. Well, I look forward to doing the video.
Yeah, that'll be so fun.
And I think that'll be fun. And you guys just have to look out for that. Subscribe to the YouTube so you don't miss it. YouTube.com/PolynesianPop. And if you guys want to listen to our archive's on our website, desertoasisroom.com. And I guess until the next time, we'll just give you guys a cheers, aloha, and mabuhay.
Mabuhay.
Salamat.
Mabuhay.